conversation on AM1180 K-YES. I'm Glen Lewerenz, and tonight we're touching on a topic a little bit that's kind of touchy, but not uncommon, unfortunately, even in the world of faith and in the world of good Catholics. This does happen, and there are many people out there now who are trying to find a way to get it done while minimizing the hard impact on children. We're talking about divorce a little bit tonight, but a better way to go about it when it is a last resort, and it does happen. We know that from statistics. We want to do everything we can to keep marriages together, but when that does happen, there are better ways than maybe the popular common way in terms of dealing with that separation and dealing with children's issues. Our guest tonight is attorney Michelle MacDonald, who has started something called the Family Innocence Nonprofit Project. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, Glenn. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's so happy to have you along. We've had a great opportunity to talk in the past. And you made a living for a long time working in family law, and you still do work in family law. But as part of that, you saw so many sad stories of the effect on children in the midst of a divorce.
Yeah, absolutely, Glenn. And I think what I'm hearing you say is that divorce should be a last resort. And what I did for 26 years before I had a calling to abolish family court in 1 year, and I'll talk to you about that later. I was litigating families, and divorce really is quite simple. It's one order. It's one line in an order that says the marriage is hereby terminated. What it has evolved to over the last 26 years is we are litigating families very readily. We're litigating social issues, like where the kids should be. We're litigating economic issues. We're even litigating psychological issues.
And here you go from two parties that have been working together, that have pledged at one point their lives to be intertwined till death do them part, and they get even more intertwined as children enter the picture. And then suddenly they're at war, and the children are like the pawns in between all too often. And then also, in addition, you end up working even in a more delicate, tricky, complicated situation with someone who you couldn't agree with on enough things to remain married. And suddenly it's even more tricky when it comes to dealing with children, their schedules, their health, their education, the religious education they get.
That's interesting to me that you say it's tricky. It's only tricky because of the adversarial process that we find the only way to get a divorce is to initiate a lawsuit, one against the other. It's so common, Glenn, that I don't even think people realize that their divorce is a lawsuit. It might be a friendly lawsuit, but it is a lawsuit, and it's a lawsuit litigating their families.
And I've seen children do okay through some of that, only to, hit some road bumps later, or some that are devastated from day one, and the parents, the fighting may have been there, obviously, during the marriage and then increases afterward. But, when it has to be spelled out, almost every minute a child can be with one parent or the other, there's a better way.
There's a better way. Glenn, that's part of the name of Family Innocence Nonprofit Project. Family innocence. We have our innocence going into a family because all we get is all we get. We have a covenant of marriage. It's huge. And you get a piece of paper that's a marriage certificate. And then there is no do this and do that in terms of your family. You have children when you want to. You raise them lovingly. You buy a house when you can. You have a job. You lose a job. That's what I call family innocence. What seems to have happened in our culture is just because a family is breaking up, we end up needing to litigate things that are already happening in their innocence. And what I've come to, it's particularly with children, Glenn, is that the United States Supreme Court jurisprudence is that courts cannot enter the realm of family. I repeat, courts cannot enter the realm of family unless there's a compelling state interest. And when we sue each other in court, we're allowing the states to enter the realm of family. Does that sound kind of complicated, what I'm talking about right now?
When it becomes a lawsuit, as divorce technically is, then that essentially invites the state right in the middle.
And that's what the Family Innocence nonprofit project is eliminating. We have a program, a process. It's been touted as the Family Innocence process. It's an actual model that eliminates courts for families altogether. And again, I can't stress enough the fact that we have become accustomed to something that is unconstitutional. Our laws are unconstitutional relating to children and families. And what I mean by that, Glenn, do you kind of sort of understand what I mean by that?
That wasn't the intent of the big law, as it were, from the Supreme Court at the beginning, that families would be, so involved in court necessarily over what should be a mom and dad decision.
Yeah, and we're creating legislation that actually litigates families and regulates families. So what happens is when you are allowed by statute to sue a family member, you are bringing in the courts voluntarily, and you to win a case, so to speak, to win custody, those kinds of things. Custody, Glenn, is a fundamental constitutional right. Your children, by virtue of giving birth, father and mother, are like the air that you breathe. So you don't need to litigate family unless there is a compelling state interest. And by that I mean, when I say abolish family court, I don't mean abolish child protection. But the family court doesn't need to protect children who are being cared for and supported by parents. That's the gist of it.
We're talking with attorney Michelle MacDonald tonight on Conversation here on AM1180 K-YES, talking about the Family Innocence Nonprofit Project, and it's a better way to separate in terms of the kids, and everything doesn't have to be litigated or left up to family court when there's a divorce involved. Again, we want to stress that divorce, obviously the last resort, but it is not uncommon at nearly 50% for people of just about all faiths. And so addressing it in a way that can maybe be better for some kids down the road is not a bad thing to do tonight. Often a husband and wife who really can't get along, but still, it's more common, and there'll be some abuse situations that are bad all the way around for one or both partners plus the kids. But there are many where the husband and wife, they can't get along, but boy, they still have very soft hearts on both sides for the kids. And this is a much better way to navigate that road for the children.
Yes, absolutely, Glenn. And what the Family Innocence Project tries to do is to educate people on their fundamental constitutional rights. You should be only going to court if you're being deprived of time and love and companionship with your children, not, Glenn, to regulate what that time is. There is family liberties that have been lost by regulating and litigating families and coming up with your own unique court order. You think of a divorce decree as one order, Glenn. It's typically several orders. Like I mentioned earlier in the show, a divorce is just one line in a document, terminate the marriage. But what we've generated is at least 5.7 million separate orders for people a year regulating their families. How has this epidemic happened? It's because it's just business as usual. And what happened to me when I had my calling to abolish court for families in 1 year, and how the Family Innocence Nonprofit Project did that, was I just started to be a witness to the light. I started to see what I was doing, what the courts were doing, what families, husbands and wives, fathers and mothers were doing to each other. And there is a better way, and the better process is the family innocence process.
And from a practical standpoint, this involves kind of like a mediated settlement, but an opportunity if the husband and wife, they, agree that they're not going to be together anymore, or maybe one side wants that much more than the other, but it looks like they won't be able to stay together, but that they can come together and try and decide on their own, certainly before they get too much of the law involved, what would be best for the children in terms of visitation schedules, in terms of how decisions are made regarding sports and school and medical issues? And
the difference is, Glenn, you hit the nail on the head, the mediated settlement. We've had mediation for over 30 years. In fact, Erickson Mediation Institute is well known. I like to say that Steve Erickson and his group invented mediation over 30 years ago. The big difference is that we're mediating agreements and we're not mediating court orders. I repeat, every agreement does not have to be a court order. And for some reason, the way family law has evolved is that if you have, for instance, a agreement that's a court order for sole custody in one of the parents, and somebody wants to change that, even voluntarily, and agrees to do it, that has to be reflected in another court order. That is the way that we have become accustomed to regulating families, Glenn.
Well, and the truth is that if a husband and wife that are separating, whatever they can agree to between the two of them, that doesn't need to be involved. If they're going to, hold up their end of the bargain, and that's the honest intent, whatever they agree to, none of that needs to be, written into law.
Well, parents together make agreements every day. They make agreements on...
You're going to pick up the kids, you're going to drop them off? Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to drop them off. I can't make the doctor's appointment. Can you bring him? Can you make the doctor's appointment? You take him to church because I have to stay home with the baby. Every day there's multiple, countless agreements that parents make relating to their children. And what we've done to do is actually, they're not guidelines anymore, and in these orders, they're actually micromanagement of families and only because they're separating. They've again, with the Family Innocence Nonprofit Project, Glenn, what we're trying to do is bring back the family's innocence to the situation. They don't have control every day over their lives. They're feeling out of control, and they might feel that a court order is the answer, and it really is not.
And now, does this process begins before the divorce is final, because we want to figure things out before anything like that gets written into law? Could it be that working through this process with the aim of doing what is absolutely and realistically best for the kids, not just using that phrase, but can actually turn some things around and people end up ultimately not getting divorced?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. In fact, it used to be that in the role of an attorney, Glenn, I would say pretty readily, it just takes one. And right away there'd be a concession, and we'd start the litigation by petitioning, serving, filing. But of late, what, particularly with the Family Innocence Project, is one of the first pieces of discernment is, are there irreconcilable differences? And that has to be an agreement of both people. Are there irreconcilable differences? The law, at least, already provides a time period for filing the divorce. In other words, and it's very little known, or little used, I should say, but the court can determine that there are irreconcilable differences if you've been separated for 6 months. So if one person was arguing, let's say, that the marriage could be saved and the other was saying no way, the court would be able to make a determination that the marriage cannot be saved if you've been separated for 6 months. We've lost that. What happens is we file the lawsuits for a divorce, even if it's a friendly lawsuit, and we have agreements for a divorce even while people are still living together. So, yes, part of the discernment is irreconcilable differences.
And part of it, maybe we're not trying hard enough before things get filed maybe sometimes?
Well, when over the years, many, many years, I get the call, okay, as the attorney, because they're ready to go. I mean, they're just like, I cannot do this anymore. I cannot take this anymore. Or they've been served papers by their spouse or the other parent, and they need to respond somehow. And this is how we're dividing families. We're litigating families. We're litigating people that live in the same home, and it's instant. You can contact me as an attorney, and I can draw up papers and serve your spouse or the other parent, contact an attorney, and instantly you're in a lawsuit just by service.
Well, you've had success here with this program, and we're going to talk now with one of the family members who did have success with that.